kill shelters are full, and a lot of them will have dogs go on code red, which is they're going to get euthanized for behavioral issues. What do we do to help alleviate this dog's mental and behavioral stresses?
Hey y'all, welcome to Buddies Besties. I'm Layla, I'm your host, and I'm here today with Jen, and we are gonna talk all animal behavior. So Jen, first of all, tell us, what's an animal behaviorist?
Yeah. So an animal behaviorist is typically someone that has a lot of experience and a lot of education, studying, observing, and helping people in various forms, private clients, groups, zoos, aquarium type settings, just modify emotions and behaviors.
Wow. And so my next question logically is, how did you become one?
Yeah, so my story is a little unique. Most behaviorists, I don't think, have their master's in psychology. And so I do, and I studied behavior at the graduate level, which I'm super proud of. It's sort of where I got my interest in behavior in general, human behavior, animal behavior. And then I got certified as a canine good citizen tester and evaluator. And then I got my license as a family paw parent educator. And that license is really focused on creating safe child and dog interactions.
What's the first certification you got?
My master's in psychology.
And then?
Canine good citizen.
What's a canine good citizen?
Yeah, that's a great question. So canine good citizen is actually regulated by the AKC, the American Kennel Club. And they basically came up with 10 items that sort of shows that your dog is able to be safe, non-reactive, and sociable in situations when you're out and about with them.
Oh, that's great.
And there's specific 10 items that they have to pass.
And so that's different than a support animal or a service animal. It's just a good citizen.
Absolutely correct. However, I will say most therapy dogs, a precursor to being a therapy dog, they get their canine good citizen. It's really a great way to have a well-rounded dog and one that can kind of adapt to all sort of situations that we put them in.
That's great.
Yeah.
So now you are the owner of Real Behavior Solutions.
I am.
So tell me a little bit about that, and just tell me a little bit about what you do in your everyday.
Okay, sure. So Real Behavior Solutions, I kind of say that's where passion meets purpose. My passion is animals, and the purpose is really to provide ethical and science-based positive reinforcement behavioral modification.
So if your animal's doing something that isn't great, like I have cats, I'm the cat lady.
Yeah.
So if they're scratching furniture, but for a dog, it would be what? What kind of behaviors would you?
So reactivity and aggression are very common.
Okay.
And I would say thirdly, fear. And then maybe the fourth category we seek, or we get a lot of seeking out for, would be just puppy development, puppy socialization, potty training. They can't get them to feel safe in their crate. So just all things puppy is something we do a lot.
Okay, so how is it different? How's an animal behaviorist different than a dog trainer?
Yeah. So a dog trainer will typically not have any certification. So really it's an unregulated industry and anybody can call themselves a dog trainer. But a behaviorist is typically one that has gone through continuing education and has, they're normally a member of a certain group of a group of professionals that come together. You pay your dues, you keep learning as you go, and you get your credentials based on how much time you put into the continuing education.
And how long have you been doing this?
I'm very old.
No,
I have been doing this since my early 20s, so 20 years.
Good for you. That's amazing. So you found something you love and you've been able to do this for that long, and you still learn new things and love what you're doing.
Exactly. I feel very blessed. I will say I have a close relationship with my clients, and I work really closely with rescue organizations. There's a big need. I don't know if the general public knows this, but kill shelters are full, and a lot of them will have dogs go on code red, which is they're going to get euthanized for behavioral issues. The rescues will pull those dogs to try to save their life, having like a life outcome, but then we're still left with what do we do to help alleviate this dog's mental and behavioral stresses.
And so they call on you.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's
pretty
really
rewarding.
See, now that's something I didn't know. I've talked to rescues before.
Yeah.
I've never heard about this code red. I had no idea.
Right.
I know they're trying to save every animal, and it's so admirable. I truly believe you all are doing God's work. Like, it is 100% no one's doing this to be famous or to become millionaires. You guys are doing it because you love the animals. And And I think it's so admirable, but also there's so many pieces of this that you don't even really know on the outside.
There is, and even a lot of shelters. I was contracted with the Fort Worth shelter, and they had a whole group of volunteers and myself as the behaviorist working with dogs that they considered behavior dogs, dogs that couldn't be handled, dogs that were showing to be so shut down that they wouldn't come out of their crate. And so it's very interesting. The more you learn about it, that a lot of people are working together to do really good things.
It's amazing. I love to hear that. So tell me, for those at home, when is it a behavior or a tick, and when is it a sign that maybe something's like wrong with your dog? Like when should you be worried, and when should you call a vet or a behaviorist?
So I'm glad you mentioned veterinarian. So typically the ethical hierarchy of the way we address a behavioral issue is we first rule out medical. You never want to just assume that it's behavioral without first saying, has this dog had a medical workup? There's certain medical conditions that can affect behavior. And when you address that, the behavior goes away. So that's sort of our first recommendation. And then how would a person know? I think that we do know our dogs really well. And if you see your dog's baseline as this is his normal routine, these are the normal behaviors I see, this is how I know my dog to be at his core, and you see a shift, people are pretty insightful to pick up on that and say, wait a minute, I've never seen him, pant and dig and try to get out of the backyard. That's completely new. So then we kind of tease away medical. And then at that point, if medical is clear, we start a customized behavioral plan.
What about if you have a new animal at home, a new puppy or a new animal to you, and you're not quite sure? What are some things that they might do that would be a startling thing for you?
Yeah. I think a lot of times dogs are really good about communicating, but they communicate with their body language. And sometimes we miss that. So I would say if a person can get really well versed, social media, YouTube, my own website, there's a lot of information out there on how do you read dogs. What does their tail mean? Is it wagging? Is it straight? Is it curled under? Sometimes we call it well eye when a dog's eyes are really, really wide and they freeze. So there's different, I think, behavioral cues that dogs give that sort of they're trying to say, hey, I'm not okay under these conditions. And we just need to start paying attention to their body language to help us say, oh, I see that is a stress sign. Let me call it a behaviorist and let me get some help with that.
And you rehabilitate tons and tons of animals.
We do. We've never said no. We get requests for, hey, I'm considering behavioral euthanasia. Can you talk me through that? Am I doing the right thing? There's something as emotional and heavy as that to something as joyful as, can my dog get Canine Good Citizen certified?
Right.
So, whole array.
Wow. So for those at home, I know one of the big things for dogs, cats seem to not care about this, but dogs really get stressed out with something like fireworks. So how at home can you prepare for that type of, it's going to be around a certain period of time and you want to make sure your animal feels good and isn't stressed out? Are there some things people at home can do to help that?
Yeah, absolutely. The dreaded fireworks.
I know.
So we all know July 4th is coming. And here's where I tell my clients, you have the power of knowing that this big aversive event is going to happen. So we have all of these months throughout the year that you can actually be preparing for 4th of July. A lot of times, and this is my first tip, a lot of times we wait until it's the day of and we're like, oh, their prescription isn't refilled. I have no frozen enrichments made. I haven't really prepared for this day.
Right.
So we all know it's coming. Some of the techniques we use is something called a pattern game. It's called What's That? And so we can actually, at the lowest level on YouTube, find sounds of fireworks and play it at the lowest level. And you hit play and you have a really high value treats to your left. And as soon as the dog alerts to it, some dogs will bark, some dogs will turn their head. They have a different response depending on the dog, but you go, what's that? Yes. And you just toss the high value treat. So you're just positively pairing that sound with something really yummy and predictable, safe, predictable, positive. And as you play this game, you start to increase the volume. So you're basically telling your dog when you hear these fireworks sound, it only predicts positive, safe, and good feelings.
So do you have to do that, like, let's just say a week, 2 weeks, Do you continuously do that? Or if you do it one time, does your dog remember then
Yeah.
for next year? Or is this something you do all the time?
The cool thing about working with dogs is every dog is an individual, and so some dogs do respond quicker than others. But at the end of the day, I tell people, are we being consistent and frequent with these positive pairings? If you do that, dogs soak up a lot of information. They're really intelligent, so it does tend to work, I would say, quicker than most people realize. The feedback is, wow, that was simple. I didn't realize that would work so well.
Yeah.
So, and it doesn't mean, I just want to say this, it doesn't mean that the what's that game is the only solution. We also add white noise when the big event comes, right? 4th of
Yep.
July, it's a lot different. They can even feel the fireworks, so it's a
Yeah.
lot different than playing the sound. But it is a way to help them cope with what's coming. And then we add other layers of feelings of safety and comfort with the big scary day.
And how long before the big scary day
Yeah.
should they start doing this?
I would say it's really, really good to start a few months ahead of time.
Okay.
Because the more your dog gets the experience of that sound equaling something that is good or positive,
Right.
the more likely we can change the conditioned emotional response. And that's what a lot of times when we modify behavior, there's the overt behavior and there's the feelings that are driving the behavior.
Right.
So we're trying to address it from the feelings level.
And how often would you do that? So if you start 2 months, so it's May, I'm going to
Yeah.
start doing this training. Is it every week?
Yeah.
Is it every other day?
Yeah.
How often do they have to do that?
Well, some people find that they love to do this with their dogs. It's a fun game. And so you can't over reinforce a dog that has a negative emotion attached to something. So if the more you do it, the better. But every other day would be sufficient
Great.
for the dog.
What about something like travel? You're
Yeah.
traveling with your dogs. I happen to think that it's way easier to travel with a dog as a cat person because there's a lot of hotels that won't take my cats. The cats don't want to be in the car.
Yeah.
But dogs seem to just love to travel. But it's challenging. It's challenging to travel with them, prepare them. So what are some tips you can give that would help them get ready to travel?
Yeah. Well, since I have a lot of different clients, I do get this question, and some of the dogs actually don't like to get in the car. So we maybe start there, depending on the individual dog. We talk about, we do a lot of puzzle toys around the car. We desensitize the door opening. So that is something that we do for dogs that just have to go with their pet parents, but not because they want to.
Right.
And then we have the other dogs, to your point, that just want to go, but they're in there for an extended period of time. So
Mhm.
we always talk about preparation for the pet parent equals preparation for the pet. So things like, do we have water bottles? Do we have their toys? Do we have some sort of brain activity? So the main event isn't I'm stuck in the car, but the main event is I can work on this frozen Kong for 45 minutes and
Right.
help the time pass.
What about flying with your animals?
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a big one, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you have a big dog. Sometimes I've seen big dogs on the flights, but I also know sometimes you have to put them in another area. I mean,
Right.
I've flown with my cats. It was interesting going through TSA with my cats.
Right.
But I don't know with dogs, like how do you even prepare for that?
So I always tell everybody safety first. Dogs are not what we consider cargo. They are our family. However, to your point, there are certain airlines that do require dogs to be stored in the cargo area. So then as a pet parent, we're worried about asking, well, what do you have someone checking on my dog? Is he being left with water? What is the air temperature? Unfortunately, I do get the phone calls when things go south. And so I feel like you can never over advocate for your dog in a
Right.
situation where they're being put on a plane, especially if they're not with you.
Right. When you have the situation where they have to be away from you,
Mhm.
what are some of the most important things to ask the airline? Like,
Yeah.
what is the most important thing to make sure that they're doing? And I don't know, do they actually check on them when they're down there? Is that a
I
thing?
think it depends on the airline.
Okay.
I think I've had feedback that there's a variety of experiences based on what airline or even what staff is on that day that
Sure.
can even have the pet parent experience a different type of satisfaction with the airline, depending on just, oh, hey, I'm a pet lover. Sure, I'll go check on your dog.
Right.
Or, oh, sorry, we don't do that. It just depends.
Depends on the airline.
That's
So
why
ask
you
all
need
these
to-
questions.
Exactly.
And do you have to have certain papers when you travel with your animal? Like, do you have to have vaccination records, or do they have to have something saying they're okay to travel?
Yeah, so vets do what's called a health certificate, and it does check vaccines. It does check, make sure that they are. I think there's even behavioral notes on there. Some dogs stress really easily, and so then the vet will give medication for when they travel to help alleviate some of that high cortisol and high adrenaline, and the nervous system's dysregulated. So the medicine is made to kind of help them regulate.
And what about when the owners go on vacation and leave their pets behind? What are some things that people should be thinking about when they're going to do that? And how do you prepare for that?
Yeah. So I'm a little biased. I tell everybody life's better with a dog. Why are we leaving them at home? But if you have to, I think it's really great to have trusted people in your social circle that can check on your dog. We also want water is very important. I mean, we've seen times where people have been gone and the dog spilt the water, but nobody was there to check and they didn't know. So really I would overthink everything. Who's the trusted person? How often are they going to visit? Are we checking water? Are we spending time with the dog? Dogs are social creatures. So when their family goes away, they can get more stressed and they may be likely to try to dig out if they're left for an extended period of time.
What about when I'm bringing a new pet home and maybe I have little kids at home or I have
Yeah.
cats or something? Like, what are some things that the viewers can think about when they're doing that and then they can prepare for?
Yeah. People have a tendency to push the pace. I just adopted this dog, come meet everybody. But what we're forgetting, I know, and I know in our love for our dogs, we want to do those things like look at my house, look at my family, here are my kids. But it can
Here's everything all at one
I'm going
time.
to give you this full life. I think, unfortunately, though, we forget that the dog is transitioning from one environment to another. Sometimes it's shelter to home, sometimes it's foster to adopter. And what we do know, like what the science and research tells us, is that oftentimes change can be felt as intrinsically stressful.
Mhm.
So while we're over here celebrating and excited, the dog may be having what we call big feelings. So the best advice is less is more. And it's really important to give them a safe space and take it very slow because at the end of the day, if an animal feels safe, they're more likely to offer those healthy behaviors that we fell in love with.
When you have an animal maybe that is showing signs of aggression, what should
Mhm.
you be looking for?
Yeah. Well, there's what we call defensive aggression and offensive aggression. So there's some different types of aggression. Resource guarding is even a type of aggression. So I feel like that's a simple question, but I could go in so many different ways with it. Anytime a dog is growling, avoidance, right? So you will see a dog move away from a baby. And as they're moving away, the parents are cooking and cleaning. And as the baby keeps creating spatial pressure going towards the dog finally, it's what we call trigger stacking. I moved away, I growled, I moved away again, and then I jumped up here. And then boom, let me intensify my communications and tell you to go away. So my point in tying that into aggression is dogs are really good at telling us, hey, I'm not okay. So I find that it's more about telling people, let's pay attention to
Yeah,
when the dog moves away the first few times and intervene before the dog has to go from politely communicating to now yelling.
right.
But unfortunately, as humans, we pay attention to the lunging, biting, and not the more subtle communications the dog has been expressing the whole entire time. And
Right.
then we say things like, it happened out of the blue.
Right.
So,
What are some tips for our viewers at home on how to introduce a dog to a little one? Let's say you've got a kid at home and you want
yeah.
to bring him in. What are some tips for that?
Yeah, one of my best tips for that is we don't want to do like direct on direct. We don't want like dog and baby like face to face. And we don't want that to be the main event. What we want is to do it in a subtle way. So for example, depending on the child's age, let's take the dog for a walk and let's have the baby in a stroller. You've got sight, sound, hearing, smell. Wow, the dog is picking up on all of that, what we call a familiarity. And as you do more subtle interactions, the dog is going to create like a familiarity bond versus a direct face to face, eye to eye. Here, smell the baby. We move away from direct to direct when it's dog and children, and we talk about how can we have situations where the dog has consent to move away if they're startled by the baby's movements versus like forced unintentionally. Parents are not
Right.
intentionally forcing the interaction, but we kind of are.
And what kind of signs of aggression would you say are things that are long term behavior things that you need to address? Because sometimes if it's an interactional thing or if it's a sound that spooks them, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But what is it when it's a long-term, we keep
Yeah.
seeing the same thing over and over again? What are some challenges and ways people to combat that?
Yeah. So I think exactly what you said is behavior is in the details. It's like in the nuances. And so when you start saying, I'm seeing a pattern of aggression in my dog, and you have a gut feeling, everyone I talk to says it was this. But when they tell me what actually made them call me, there was this incident, this incident, this incident, this incident. So you start getting a history of the dog behaving a certain way, often under certain conditions. So sometimes, and often, if we really want to talk about aggression, when you have a dog acting aggressively in all situations, that's a very serious conversation versus a dog that is, we have clients who have dogs that are really great at letting people enter their home, but when they're on a leash, it's different. When they're out on a walk, they may lunge at the jogger. So they're only seeing aggression situationally. And it depends on, sometimes the dog has high prey drive, so movement triggers them. So we really get down to the details when we help people with aggression.
And that's really down to breeds too.
Yeah,
different
there's certain
breeds have different triggers, right?
Yeah, there are. So yeah, that's a great point. When we look at behavior, we look at genetics, we look at learning history, we look at past training, which is very interesting because a lot of people may have used a shock collar or a spray bottle. And when we use punishment and aversion, we actually see what we call displacement. You'll see aggression happen in other areas of the dog's life, but not directly at the punisher. So it's very interesting. But we consider the breed, genetics, developmental is something else we consider. Dogs have a sensitive period where they're likely to have stronger reactions and you'll see more aggressive behavior. So we really do not only look at breed, but some of the other factors that contribute to behavior.
So you brought up shock collars. I
Mhm.
think they're also known as
E-collar,
e-collars. I feel like that's, maybe they're trying to market, or I always like they're giving it the PR spin, right? Of the
Yeah.
shock collars. Now the e-collar, there's lots of
It's
different.
just a TENS unit, they say.
Right. And it's, and
So-
then there's also the choker collar or the
the
spike
pinch
collar.
prong.
So what did you call it?
Pinch prong.
Pinch prong. That's
Yeah.
right. All these technical, I just know it by what everyone else calls it.
Yeah.
What's your view on those? People use tools to train their dog and, get them to behave a certain way. What is your thought?
We could have a whole segment on this. So I will try to keep it as brief as possible. So the very first thing that everyone should know who's listening is that when you look at the science and the research and all of the ethical, the ethical guidelines that vets follow and trainers that are certified follow, it all moves away from punishment and aversives. Because the science says when they do research, dog groups that have e-collars on versus dog groups who are training using positive reinforcement, the dogs with the e-collars show more stress signs. So they look at their owner less, their tail wags less, they actually show avoidance behaviors. So what looks like results can often look like a shutdown dog because they're trying to avoid pain versus the group in the reinforcement group, they want to learn. They want to connect with their owner. There's a huge difference there.
Difference. Okay. It's really interesting.
It is, yeah.
Do you train other animals than dogs? Because we've been talking all about
Yeah.
dogs. You want to come to my house and train my cats to not scratch my furniture? I would love that. And I actually also will tell you, I know that it's me. I know that I'm the one that is causing the issue. But do you also work with cats, or is it just dogs that you work with? How
Yeah,
does this
so
work?
dogs and cats.
Okay,
Mhm.
great. So any tips for cat parents out there then?
Well, I do love cats. I am a behaviorist that mostly gets hired for dogs, but I have to tell you, we love cats in my home. I would say for cats, they are also responsive to reinforcement. We basically say in the industry, animals speak reinforcement. At SeaWorld, you won't see them strap an e-collar on the animals because guess what? It destroys the relationship. So with cats, same thing. A lot of people, I think, do push the cat down, spray them. There's a lot of aversives happening. So I think it's cool for cat parents to know that we can also provide positive reinforcement training for cats.
I don't do that. I just let them do whatever they want. That's how it works in my house.
And if you're happy and they're happy, it's okay.
I'm happy, they're happy. Sometimes people around me aren't too happy that they're just kind of running amok, and they're treat monsters. We call them treat monsters in my house.
I love that.
Yeah. This has been really, really fun. Thanks for joining us. Maybe we'll have you back and do another topic just on cats.
Okay,
That'd be
thank
great.
you.
Thank you so much for coming. Hey, y'all, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And you know what I always say, adopt, don't shop.